Please welcome Mary Gerisch.
Yeah, Mary.
Itakwe Oisin. That means we are all related. It's a traditional Lakota greeting, which I think is especially appropriate for a day when we are talking about human rights and healthcare. So today we're going to explore, and as you all know, I'm sure, there are many treaties that our US government has broken, not honored, etc., with indigenous peoples. But what we're talking about today goes way beyond that. That goes to the fact that we are all human beings and that we literally do have a right to health care. Yeah, I'm not talking about we want to have a right to health care. I'm talking about international law. I'm talking about treaties. Okay, we all know what treaties are, right? In the international world. I mean, imagine if one of the treaties that our government had signed and ratified through the people up there in that building, say to end the Second World War, were breached by our government. What do you think would happen? The international community would go crazy and they would be called out on it. Here's the problem. We don't all realize that we have a real right to health care. I mean, really, 3 or 4 treaties, some of which were ratified and some of which were just signed, but either way, it is international law that we have a right to health care. We don't have a right to health insurance. It is not the same thing at all. And in our country, people put an equal sign between the two. And honestly, I've been over in Geneva talking about this, and even some really well experienced, intelligent, wonderful activists from our country go over there and say, I never really thought about the fact that when we talk about healthcare as a right, I was thinking about health insurance. No, it's not the same. People die for lack of health care. In fact, in our country, we have the highest maternal and infant mortality rate of any industrialized country in the world. Okay. We also have the lowest life expectancy. And this is even before COVID. But you can imagine what it's like now. Lowest life expectancy of any industrialized country in the world. People die for lack of health care in our country once every 2 minutes. Do you know how many people that means have died since we have all been assembled here this morning? It is crazy and it is not right. And we need to educate our legislators about healthcare actually being a human right. So, yeah, we have to come out and educate each other, our families, our relatives, any organization we might belong to, that no, we're not trying to get this as a right. We already have this as a right. We need to name it and claim it. And we have to do that in so many different ways. One of the ways is, of course, passing federal legislation for Medicare for all. But there's another way. People in other countries also don't always realize that, for example, our government, when they passed Obamacare, they touted this to the international community as a really big step forward in healthcare. What? It's not about healthcare. It's about health insurance. People still die every day because they can't afford, and even people who are insured under that act can't afford deductibles, can't afford copays, and they die. Now, we have a human right to be cared for by our government in a health care system. not to die from lack of it. So what we want to do is we want to call this situation to everybody's attention, not just those of us who are here today, not just all of you wonderful people who are watching this on Facebook now or in the future, not just all of the wonderful organizations and folks that we've heard from today, but everybody. We need to educate every organization. We need to educate. The most that we need to do is educate our government, because they have been getting away with telling the United Nations that they're working on this. And of course they support it. They forgot that when Eleanor Roosevelt first took the Declaration of Human Rights to the United Nations, and she's, as you know, was from our country, and the United Nations approved it and set up a Human Rights Commission that we don't really care about much in our government anymore. I mean, we like to go there and we like to say, oh, those guys in that country are violating their people's human rights, and we're going to call them out for it. Well, guess what? We need to call our government out for it now more than ever, particularly since we have people dying from COVID just disproportionately based on their ethnicity, especially folks on the reservations, based on their economic status, because they just can't afford it. What should they not feed their family and go get treated for COVID and let their family die too? And then you have more than one death to account for our denial of the right to health care? No, probably not a good plan. So there is a whole group of us, and I see a lot of you here today, and I really appreciate it, and we need to spread the word, who have decided that our government, the ones back there, the ones in the White House, the ones in our states, the ones in our towns, the ones on our reservations, need to be educated. And of course, their attitude is, oh, if healthcare for all were such a good idea, we would have done it already. That's what they tell all the countries who have this. They say, oh, well, and so how do you, we can't afford that. Okay, so how do you account for the fact that a simple healthcare item like an MRI in our country costs more than 2/3 what it costs in France or the UK for the same machine and the same services? It's because, as we all know, but we need to remain aware of, it's because it's not about healthcare right now for our government. It is about insurance companies making profit off of our suffering and our deaths. And that is not only a violation of our human right to healthcare, but it is tragic and unacceptable. So we are going to be filing, a group of us, and I hope a lot of you will join us. We are going to be filing a complaint with the United Nations Human Rights Commission. Now, in case you're not sure what that is, this is a human rights commission that meets in Geneva, and they address these issues. And there are people on this committee from many different nations, and they find out, the first thing they want to know is, did we exhaust all our remedies domestically? What remedies? Our government doesn't recognize we have the right, so no, we probably didn't yet. And we probably can't, because we don't have a human rights commission, despite UN recommendations for many years in our government. So what we're going to do is, and we have organizations now who have agreed to sponsor the complaint to the United Nations Human Rights Commission. And those are, of course, March for Medicare for All, and the All Unions Committee for Single Payer Healthcare, and National Single Payer, and Real Progress. Oh my gosh, thank you. I don't want to leave anybody out. And the National Lawyers Guild International Committee, because they're very skilled at this, and the Poor People's Campaign. And we want other organizations to agree to sign on, preferably national organizations. But the real important part of filing this kind of complaint is that, as we all know, because we've heard so many stories today, and it just touches your heart. I mean, you're not talking about philosophy. You're talking about human suffering. And when we look each other in the eyes and talk about human suffering, I mean, I can remember at some kind of a party rally a number of years ago, a party that isn't in favor of single payer. And I can remember people coming out on the stage and saying, oh no, we don't want health care for all. We can't afford it, and it won't do anybody any good. And the audience cheered. Now, I bet you if they had had somebody come out on that stage and tell a story about their personal experience with someone dying or about to die from lack of health care, I can't imagine the audience cheering, because we are all human beings. And whether we like it or not, to stand there and look someone in the eye and hear about their suffering has an impact, even if you're trying to ignore it. So what we need to do for this UN complaint, we need stories like the ones we've had today, any kind of healthcare horror story. Did you go to the hospital and get a bill for $6,000 that you couldn't pay and might have put you into bankruptcy, or that you had to not repair your car because you couldn't afford to pay your hospital bill? Can you not even buy insurance because you can't afford the premiums, let alone the copays and the costs? There are so many healthcare stories we can tell, and we have to tell. And they will be recorded, and they will be either whatever is easier for you, either in writing or by talking to someone on the committee and relating it and having them transcribe it and then read it back, see if they missed anything, or by video. And these are all going to get sent over to Geneva, because we need the international community to call out our government for denial of a human right and a breach of treaties, for heaven's sakes. These are not just, these are international treaties. These are governed by international law. This is something we totally have to do. So anyone you know with a healthcare story, they can submit it to March for Medicare for All on the website. And please, we really need to do that. And I don't know how long I've been talking because I accidentally paused my timer. So I might have been talking before 10 minutes. I planned to talk about 8 minutes, and I could let you know that during the time I've been talking, 16 people died. So if I've talked longer than that, it's more people than that. We cannot avoid telling our stories and bringing international wrath down on our government anymore. Thank you.